This is the Digital Trust Podcast. In every episode, we strive to bring support to those of you who serve on the front lines and in the trenches of data and technology. We endeavor to bring understanding to the under-resourced and underappreciated, help remove your stress, and provide relief to your pain. Welcome to the Digital Trust Podcast. Sit down with us as we give you hard-hitting advisory conversations to help you build digital trust with your stakeholders and clients, and actionable takeaways to help you become a digitally trustworthy organization.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Trust Podcast. I'm Christian Redshaw, your host today, and with me is Jeff Edwards and Alan Jin. So Alan is the CEO and co-founder of Zero Down Software, and Jeff is the chief evangelist. Gentlemen, welcome once again to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Awesome. So let's get into it. We're going to start with something called virtual business continuity. So Jeff, you coined that term way back in the 1980s, which was many decades ago. What inspired that idea back then?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Christian. Yeah, so back in the 80s, after I left IBM, I joined a company called SunGuard Recovery Services. And basically, they provided hot site recovery facilities, big data centers, mainframes, that you would take up all your backup tapes and restore operations at an alternate site. And that was called a hot site. And I worked there, and I was like, we would reestablish all these, disasters, mostly physical disasters. And one thing that became painfully apparent was that we'd restore the operations after days or weeks, and then we'd have 10 or 100, maybe 150 terminals that would allow most of the IT operations folks to continue to manage operations, but 10,000 employees were out waiting to go back to work. And so I was thinking, this is crazy. So why don't we just build an infrastructure that was reminiscent of the fabric, the mesh network of the infrastructure for networking, and we make a digital infrastructure like that, and then we send everybody home and re-engage in the most physically dispersed environment, which is the home structure for people to go to and work, and re-engage them that way. Mm-hmm. And the time, it was a little bit crazy, but that's I was doing a presentation. That's how I met this guy, Alan Jen.
And I take it you might be equally as crazy still today, but that's quite a start. And I think you've had far-reaching impacts from that concept ever since. So let's drive down that road and just keep the shovel digging here. Talking about and sticking with you, Jeff, by the way, talking about backup-only thinking. Can you define what's the alternative to that? I believe you referred to that as application-first resilience. Can you define that for us, Jeff?
Yeah. So what we discovered. So when I met Alan in the early '90s, we then took our show on the road, so to speak. We spent time at AT&T Bell Labs. We spent time over at Storage Tech and Hitachi Data Systems. And long story short, learned the network infrastructure, how to do a network right, build up country network infrastructure. We learned how to build and pioneer network attached storage, and then we did that for some of the three-letter agencies. And then we moved on to build some of the first storage area networks that were then became the industry standard, basically, in terms of how to modularize and put them all together. And along the way, we discovered that in interviewing. Well, Alan, it was during Y2K, or before Y2K, you were asked to kind of lead a group from a chief architect for the White House. Alan, you want to talk about that real quick? Because it gets us to the crux of the problem of backup only and then moving into the why the application is so important.
Yeah, I think time has passed where this isn't classified anymore. But in 1997, the Clinton administration was concerned about the Fortune 500 recovering from Y2K. And so a group of us, there were 18 companies involved, and I was really on loan to do this project. We were looking at all the technologies that were available to see how long would it take to recover a Fortune 500 company if Y2K actually happened. And naively enough, we weren't even thinking about whether or not the recoveries or the backups were any good. We were just saying, can we recover? So we interviewed most of the Fortune 500, and we did some calculations using the technology that was available, and we had to report to the vice president that it would take us 15 years to recover the Fortune 500. Potentially, if we had the bandwidth or the network capability, we could maybe shrink that to 10, but we were comfortably looking at 25 years, 30 years, which was unacceptable. And fortunately, we didn't have to see how long it would take us to do that. But while looking at the backups, we started realizing something, and Jeff and I were looking at the problem was we were actually creating the issue, and that was we were being able to compress and pack more data and data blocks into storage frames than the networks could keep up with. So imagine if your network pipe is only a megabyte and your data backup is 5 megabytes, you've got to get 5 megabytes through a 1 megabyte pipe. We were starting to increase it to where we were actually putting 30 megabytes through that pipe. So that's how you can see we did the math about how quickly would it take if we took all the data and backups of the Fortune 500 and we pushed it through the known network, how long it would take us to do it. And that was in best case scenario.
Mm-hmm. So that's pretty epic, and that's looking back at the origins. Now, fast forwarding to today, gentlemen, and actually I'll direct this to you, Alan. How does Zero Down put application first resilience into practice now, with not necessarily the Fortune 500, although it could be, but maybe some small organizations as well?
Yeah. So one of the things that we learned from this exercise was the Fortune 500 really didn't care about the things that we as vendors thought they cared about. We thought they cared about, the servers and the networks and whether or not they were running Cisco, and that they really cared how big their storage devices were. And, we used to package them up and make them very attractive and pretty and glossy. And we thought that they cared about that. And we thought that they cared about speeds and feeds of the hardware devices. What we learned as we got into the Y2K component, they said, we don't really care about the hardware at all. We don't care about the infrastructure, and we don't care about the network if it came time to recover it all. But what they did care about was a handful of applications. And they were telling us, we want the applications that are customer facing or revenue generating to always be available. And so that always be available turned into our go-to always available idea of building an infrastructure that was always available. So application first then turned us, around 1998, 99, Jeff and I and our team started thinking more about the application than we did about the data, because that's what the customers are telling us. And then we started to think about, how do we get the applications further and further apart? The banking industry at that time was saying, oh, you can have a failover site 50 kilometers away, as an example. And that's a lot about how SunGard and Comdisco and the really good backup and recovery vendors were designing their systems. We heard that they were going to start trying to push it to 300 kilometers. And how can we do that? By providing continuous replication. And then we went to a fail-safe idea instead of a fail-over idea with no human intervention.
Alan, you've championed a concept called a world without downtime. So where did that come from, and practically what does that look like? What does zero downtime on websites and applications look like?
Well, as Jeff said earlier, when we were working on the Y2K project, it was really just for the Fortune 500. This now became a global idea, and Jeff and I were discussing this idea with our founders, and that was, we need to think bigger. We need to be thinking about disrupting the industry and having a world without downtime. And so that became the company North Star, a world without downtime. Then we started thinking about, what can we do, because we were very frustrated with outages. We had experienced about 300 disasters by this period of time. How can we actually rethink continuity? Because if the internet is always on, your business should always be on.
But let's end with this one question, maybe half a minute. What's the first question our listeners should ask their teams?
Yeah.
When's the last time you tested your backups and restored them?
Well said.
When was that? Yeah. It's that simple.
Have you done
I
it?
think, Alan.
When was the last time?
Yeah,
And what were the results? Yeah.
If your primary systems failed right now, how long would it be before your customer noticed? And how long would it take you to recover? And if the answer is anything but they won't notice and we're already recovered, I think it's time you rethink your resilience strategy.
I think being strategic about this, what you guys are really talking about is being proactive about minimizing the impact of significant negative events. It's proactive. It's part of proactive risk management.
Yes.
Yeah. No, we have customers that have run for more than a decade, and they don't know if they're in safe house mode or our technology mode, or they're in production mode, because it flips between the two, and we do it seamlessly without any interruption, without any knowledge or impact for 14 years in this case, and just one customer.
Such an important thing you guys are doing, and I know we'll be seeing more of you. Thank you guys so much for being our guests on the show once again today. I'm sure our viewers and listeners will really appreciate these insights, and a special thank you to our viewers and listeners as well for taking time out of their day to join us in this conversation, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks for joining us today on the Digital Trust Podcast. If you found this conversation helpful, please share it with someone you care about. And if you'd like to receive our monthly newsletter, please click the link in the description to subscribe. And to put your mind at ease, our newsletter will include episode summaries with key points and actionable takeaways, plus a heads up on the upcoming episode guests. Rest assured, it won't be a spammy sales message, and we will never sell or share your information. Thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.